Ah, yes. So lovely for Hannah to join us here for another episode of Kinstretch with the Fitness Alchemists. Really excited about this class today. It's going to offer a very challenging but also very accessible way to work on your hip internal rotation, which is just so important, especially if you're just getting started with Kinstretch. So for props today, all you're going to need is some nice floor space to work on, as well as a block. A thick pillow could work as well. We're going to use it to squeeze between the legs and kind of prop a leg up on it. So you just want to make sure it has some substance if it's a pillow. And I guess Hannah is going to be kind of choir girl sort of status today. Pretty good. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with some quadruped work. So come onto hands and knees or elbows and knees, whatever works for you. And just take a moment to scan your body and feel that you are actively engaged through your hands and through your feet, especially if you're coming into this cold, you haven't warmed up at all, which we're not asking that you do. You want to just give your body that chance to elevate its temperature through some contraction, some active effort. So once you feel that clearly through your hands and your feet, begin that cat-cow motion, curling your tailbone under and really clocking how you can feel the contraction on the front side of your body as you move into this spinal flexion shape. Noticing if you have any commentary going on about what it should or shouldn't feel like, you can just let that go on by and tune into just what's happening as you reach your tailbone the other way. Some days you wake up and you're just a little bit stiffer. Some days you wake up and you have new sensations to be aware of. So we just want to make sure your awareness is turned all the way up here. Good. As you go into this second rep, really try to keep your upper back and neck extended as you start that curl under with your tailbone, so you can really feel the difference between flexion in your spine and extension, and you can note as you go from one extreme to the other. Good. Okay, and same thing here. As you finish up flexion, really commit to keeping your upper back and neck rounded in flexion as you begin reaching your tailbone up. And this should help you feel a little more clearly the contraction of the muscles along your spine on the back that really help pull you into extension. Okay. And then as you finish up an extension, I want you to hold that for just a moment and notice what you feel going on in your hip crease. So we call this a spinal exercise because you're moving your spine, but obviously your hip is involved because we're tilting the pelvis. We'll come back and talk about that more later, but just noting for now. Go ahead, relax that tension and come on to your side lying position. Here's where you might want to grab a block to have close at hand. You can start with it under your head. We'll need it for the leg in just a moment, but let's warm up with just your normal hip car. So brace again using your arms to push into the floor in whatever setup feels good for you. And then begin driving that top leg behind you. And really note that complete stop feeling where you're not able to reach your heel any further back. Once you're there, then start lifting up to the ceiling, reaching your knee towards your armpit, and finishing that big sweep around with your knee. Once your knees come together, let's go the other way. So we just tick-tock back and forth, doing a little inventory on this first round in each direction with your hip. And then we will keep going for time. Just continue, keep an eye on the clock for you. Back and forth. You're always invited to stop off at any position and pause and just note any sensations of stretch or sensations of contraction that maybe are new that you're feeling, or maybe you don't feel that you're used to and you want to search out those sensations. That is such valuable information to take in. So give yourself that opportunity. Great. Good. Take 10 more seconds here. Finish up the rep you're on. Good. Okay. And then we're going to stay in this side lying position and take your block, straighten out your bottom leg so that it's out of the way. It doesn't have to be stock straight if you want to bend it a little bit or whatever feels good, but mostly this gives us room to prop up that top leg. So you can see Hannah has the block right under the thigh, and it's inside the knee joint, meaning she's not resting her knee on it because that would, she'd run into it. So you want to have the block kind of in your inner thigh tissue. And then from here, again, brace your upper body using your top hand for pressure. And we're going to work on just a hip capsule CAR. Before you start moving though, brace tightly and float that thigh so that you're still touching the block, but you're not resting on the block, so it's an active hip. And then once you start your rotation, you'll feel that that active hip really plugs into the rotation into internal rotation and then the other way. As you go into external rotation, you might hit the floor, which is fine, and just push into the floor without letting your thigh move away from the block. And here we are, we're going back and forth for hip capsule CARs. As you do this, just tune into that complete stop feeling, where your body is telling you that it cannot rotate the hip joint anymore. That's a really, really powerful border to get in touch with, and this is our chance to do that, to really feel clearly how much rotation is available at that joint. Keep working, 10 more seconds, moving at your pace and finding your end range at hip rotation. Excellent. Let's relax that. Cool. We'll go over to the other side, start with hip CARs, and then see how that other hip rotates. Also, I think I say this pretty much anytime Hannah is my Kinstretch model, but you might have different amounts of internal rotation than this special pony. She has quite a bit of hip internal rotation, so another reminder to not play the comparison game with your hip joint. Okay, brace, and let's start with that full hip CAR, driving your top heel behind you. Once you feel the stopping point, lift your shin to the ceiling and smoothly sweep that leg forward, knee to chest, and then knee all the way in front of your belly button before knees touch. And we'll go the other way and tick-tock this hip CAR. Now, if you're getting started with these hip CARs, they're sort of new for you. The key place to notice is if your pelvis is trying to roll. That is, you want to avoid feeling like you're rolling onto your back at any point. Your pelvis will really try to volunteer and jump in there, but that is not your hip. So when we're doing a hip CAR, you want to try to only move your hip joint and not let any of the neighboring parts jump in on the movement. Keep working there, keeping your body tension nice and strong, nice and secure. Not working at maximum effort yet today, but just enough effort to really feel active control through your full range of motion. Go ahead and finish up this hip CAR. Nice, okay? And then again, we'll put that prop underneath your top thigh and just sweep that bottom leg out of the way. Okay, and then once you get set up here, take a moment to get organized, kind of feel your torso brace, find the hand position that works best for you. And then when you feel like you're ready, you're sort of going to test that brace by just hovering your thigh. And you want to be in a spot where you can still feel the block, but you're not resting on it. And then we're ready for hip capsule CARs. 1 minute exploring how much rotation you can wring out in each direction. You might get more or less lift with that ankle as your thigh rotates into internal rotation. And then you might get closer to the floor or even push into the floor as you move into hip external rotation. And if you run into the floor, that's your stop today, that's fine. You can just push into the floor to feel that actively. Good, 30 more seconds.
Yeah, I can touch the floor on this side.
Nice, yeah. Each side will be different, that's for sure. And will change over time.
For sure.
Yeah. Hannah's been working hard on her hip external rotation and is noticing. It's pretty cool. All right. Taking a little moment. We're going to do a lot of hip internal rotation work, so the more clear you can be, the better. And go ahead, relax that effort. Very nice. Okay, so now I'm going to have you roll onto your back, and you can have that block close at hand because we will use it a little bit later on. And we're just going to do a quick check-in on that same capsule rotation, that same rotation of your hip joint, but from this position. This is a great position because you have so much reference in terms of the floor. So let's start with the left leg just coming up into a little flexion so that foot comes off the floor.
That's the one I just did.
Okay.
Maybe whichever leg was not working.
Sure, yeah, whatever was your first leg for the warm-up.
I'm helping us out.
Okay, and then once you're here, try to get that shin on the working side parallel with the floor, so you have a little tabletop moment. A little more bend in the knee, there we go. And then you can either put your finger on your kneecap to feel that your thigh bone is now an axle, or you can place your fingers right on your thigh and just note that there's not going to be any movement of that thigh bone around except for rotation. All right, so brace your body, really connect your back to the floor so you're not going to move anything other than the hip, and just do 30 seconds from here. As you rotate, try to spend just a little more effort than you were working on during the warm-up phase. So that might mean that you just fight a little bit harder for the end range position. Once it feels like it stops, just send a little bit more tension. When you send that signal, your brain might try to compensate by shifting the thigh bone away from your body, and you don't want that to happen. Really fighting to keep that thigh bone straight up to the ceiling. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Good. Okay, set that down. Go to the other side. And maybe what you're noticing at this point is that when you're on your back with one leg working, it is essentially a core exercise. So we're doing a lot of core training today, even in the context of hip internal rotation work. So find that core brace, keep your thigh bone still, use your hand as a reference point as you start 30 seconds of rotation here. There we go. One thing that can be very helpful is to just play with different concepts for understanding that rotation. So one that I've been using a lot is imagining that there's a little X drawn on your hamstring area, and yeah, that you're turning that X outward and then inward. Sometimes that can just help you map onto what we're asking you to do here. Good. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Awesome. All right. So I'm actually going to have you stay with that side because it's close to the camera. So I want them to really be able to see here.
Thanks.
So we're going to work on a position called hip sleeper. We've done another class with that, so you might be familiar. But the setup for that is going to be just by walking your working leg straight out to the side, walking that foot out. So kind of just spider walk it out. And you should notice at some point it doesn't really want to go much further. And then once you get there, you can drop your knee down to the ground. Okay? Now, for now, no worries if there's some tension in the knee joint on that inner side of the knee. We're not going to be loading it intensely now. A little later on, we'll talk about how to work around that. But for now, I just want you to note that Hannah's hip is internally rotated here. Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, so try to feel that rotation, even though your femur bone is at a different angle than what we were just working on. This is a really end range internal rotation position. Now we have a chance to work on the muscles that contract and pull you into that rotation by flexing the hip from here. So I'm going to have Hannah just demonstrate a rep or two, and then you can jump into it with us. Bracing, spine is staying flat on the mat. Slowly make the foot light, and then try your hardest to keep that rotation as you lift that leg and bring that knee as close to the chest as you can while holding on to as much rotation as you can. And then control the way down, trying to set the foot down as wide as possible. Okay, so as you join us here, you might have noticed Hannah was able to walk her foot out really wide, and then as soon as her foot came up, the foot walked in a little bit, and that indicates that true end range position for active hip internal rotation, which is what we want to train here.
We also say if you're getting any pinch here as you bring your leg in.
Yeah, so as you bring that thigh bone in, you're going to feel muscles contracting there, and that's good stuff. You might feel some cramping, but what we don't want is that bone-on-bone pinchy feeling. So if you start coming into that flexion and you feel that, you're just going to stop right short of that pinch feeling, and that's the range you're going to be training today, all right? And so let's do this first side. Brace, we're going to work for time, just 30 seconds, but a real high intensity effort. The spine is flat, and then make that foot light, and then smoothly and slowly with control, bring that thigh in towards your stomach as close as you can. Find a complete stop, and then as you start going back to the floor, try to add rotation to the joint, yes, so that you're setting your foot down even wider than you picked it up. Keep working here, team. Back and forth. You might notice that your torso is trying to roll away one way or the other, and you're keeping your core braced to help with that. 10 more seconds, just enough time for one more rep. Really trying to feel that rotation through this whole hinge of your hip. 3, 2, 1. Excellent. Okay, so Hannah was doing a great job of not just plopping the foot down each time, but really controlling the lower, and that's going to be key to getting a lot of training. Okay, little crampiness. Training.
That's a nice word.
All right, so maybe just turn around, Hannah, so they can see your other hip, and let's move over to the other side. Again, we will start by walking the foot out into a little hip sleeper position. This is a passive end range position, okay? And that helps you understand why that foot is gonna jog in a little bit when we make it active. So it should feel pretty passive here, just letting your brain get accustomed to this position. And then with some clear intention, start to brace your spine flat against the floor. Good. Turn your brace on through your whole body, let it really spread out. And then here we go, 30 seconds of work, making that other foot light, and then keeping as much bring the leg in. Good. Keep winding that rotation up as you send the leg back down, tapping the floor and going right back up. So you're not letting your body rest between reps, but you're keeping your tension. Good stuff. Keep working. Good. 15 seconds, team. Keep asking your body for more of that active rotation. What would it take to turn that hamstring more out to the side? Turn that X that I was describing more to the side. And smoothly set down. Relax. Great. Okay, so we're going to come back for a second round on that first side. So, nice. Hannah's going to keep going back and forth for you. So kind. All right, so you can see Hannah grab the block here just to help with the brace. Any strategy you can employ to get more tension out of your upper body will really help assist that lower body.
I'm just noticing that, like, the side on my working leg, that part wants to come off. So really
yeah.
giving some extra love there.
So especially useful using the floor. You can feel if your lower back is coming off the ground, so take a moment to cement it down. Use your abs to brace to help you do that, and then slowly start lifting that foot off the ground so you can clock how much rotation you're able to maintain. This round, try to pull that thigh a little closer to your stomach. Again, respecting any bone-on-bone pinching that you might feel and not pushing into that, but really trying to max out how much hip flexion you can find with this hip internally rotated. Good work. Very nice. Maximum effort, 15 more seconds. Spend it, team. Really spend it. This is going to set you up so well for the next exercise. 5, 4, stay on tension right to the end. 1 and 0. Great work. Okay, let's finish up on the second leg. And find that hip sleeper setup. Find the flat spine so that your lower back is not arching away from the floor. Connect with the ab active contraction that you might feel, and then you keep that upper body strategy going as you start making your working leg light on the floor and then pulling towards your stomach for hip flexion. Good. And again, you might have less lift than Hannah's showing or more lift, but you're just trying to hold on to as much of that internal rotation as possible throughout. And it might increase or decrease as you move, that's okay. But just keep trying to send that rotation signal. Good, 15 seconds. Flirting with any cramp sensations you're finding. Good work. Nice, keep working here. 4, 3, 2, and 1. Control your set down wherever you might be. Excellent. And then we're going to give your hips a little break and have you come up to standing, okay?
Thank God.
All right. So like I said before, when we were doing cat-cow, the movement of the lower segments of your spine are really relying on how much space you have in your hip joint. So with a drill like we just did, we really maxed out the usable space in each joint, which might feed a little bit more freedom of motion through your lower back. So we're going to do cat-cow, but really just for your lower back, for your lumbar spine. And we're going to do it from a standing position, a little different than usual. So I'm going to have you just bend your knees a little bit, place your hands on your thighs, kind of like we used to call it like shortstop setup, where you're just resting on your thighs. And then from here, really anchor your hands so you feel your upper body stiffen up into a nice muscly statue feeling, and commit to only moving basically from your rib cage down. Okay, so you're going to try to keep your upper body still, and then using that upper body tension, begin curling your tailbone under, finding some real low ab contraction below your belly button, behind your belly button, maybe even up into your rib cage, but again, only trying to move the spinal segments below your ribs. Once you feel like you get to that rib line, pause and start going the other direction into hip extension. Here's where you might find you are able to get more extension if the hips are a little bit more free to move. So something just to look for. Keep going back and forth here, 40 more seconds. Always useful to check back in on your hands and your armpits. Are they still active, or have they kind of floated away in your awareness? Good. Very nice work. Trying to increase the rotation you can find in your pelvis with active effort as you run into your end range. Moving with control, not letting anything happen quickly. Last 10 seconds, can you make your hands heavier? Could you even make your feet heavier into the ground? Could you increase gravity? 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Very nice. Okay, Hannah, what are you laughing about?
You've just done a slow motion twerk, in case you were wondering.
There you go.
Score at home.
Yeah, so if you're trying to work on that particular movement skill, this is a specific exercise for you.
This whole class.
Awesome. Okay, so then come back into your supine hip sleeper setup, and here's where we're going to engage some isometric training. Try to connect that passive and active hip room. So flatten out your spine again. This is going to be really critical that you don't let your spine roll, and begin walking that working leg out to the side. And here's where we really want to max it out. Really try to walk it out as far as you can, and then drop the knee down towards the ground. Okay? Now, when I get set up into this position, this feels great for my knee, feels great for my hip. I really feel a twisting sensation all around the hip socket. That's a good indicator of that we're actually working on the capsule, which is what we're trying to aim for. But Hannah brings up a great point as we were setting up this class, that sometimes the knee can be a real stopper for you, in which case you might want to plug in your block underneath that knee. You can see there's a few ways to do that, either under the thigh to support the leg, under the actual knee joint. It takes a little finagling, but now's the time to do that. You might
finagle a bagel.
Yeah, you might find other props that work well too to fill in that gap there. Okay, so if you've found a good setup, I just want you to chill here and breathe. But there's another alternative that I'm also going to show, because if you have very limited internal rotation, meaning your foot doesn't walk that far out to the side, there's another alternative that really works well. So Hannah, if I can just have you do that. So that's going to actually be from side lying. So just roll over to the side. So your working leg is going to be your top leg. Drive that leg behind you all the way back, and try to set the knee as close to the ground as you can. And then if possible, hook your other ankle on that thigh. Okay. Now as you start to roll onto your back, you're not going to get all the way to your back, but at some point you're going to find, oh, I've wound up my hip and I can't go any further. Hannah's able to get to her back because she has so much room, but that's a setup option that might work really well for you if you're real locked up in your hip. Okay? So whatever setup you have found, just try to really get comfortable there, because we're going to do some isometric, go nowhere contractions from here. Okay? So take one final breath in, filling up your torso and bracing, kind of pressurizing that air in through your midsection. Commit to feeling your pelvis stay on the ground. So you're not going to let it roll away at all. Hands on pelvis or hands on stomach can help. And then we're going to start trying to pressure that working foot, that working leg down into the floor with a rotational effort. So the idea here is that you're sweeping your foot through the floor towards your midline. Hannah, can you just indicate the rotation of your, oh, I was just thinking on your thigh bone.
Oh.
Just, yeah, that rotation is what's driving that heaviness of your foot. So bring that heaviness up to about 20% effort. As you continue building, tune into not letting your thigh go up to the ceiling or away from the block if you're using the block, so that there's some active effort keeping your thigh bone still, and keep adding that rotational feeling, trying to make your foot heavier and heavier up to 50% of your maximum effort. Keep it at 50 and start thinking about how big of a dent you can put into the floor with that foot as we come up to 60%. The rest of your body should clearly feel like it's working here. Bring it up to 70%. We're only doing one of these rounds, so really spend your effort here. 80%. If the floor wasn't there, your foot would just be rotating into your midline. 90%. Good. And now for the last 10 seconds, ramp up as much contraction as feels safe for you. Greatest safe contraction for PAILs effort. 5, 4, 3, 2, and melt down that effort. As you melt it down, you might notice that the hip feels a little more spacious, and therefore you can walk the foot out a little wider. That's fair game. Take up that slack. Okay. Now, I want to help you feel this opposite contraction, this rails contraction. Just place your hand on that working side right on your front pocket area. So that should grab some of the tissue that's going to start rotating your hip. So brace your torso, and then start trying to contract the muscles right underneath that hand. And that, if you're able to feel that contraction, you should feel that it's essentially making your foot lighter on the floor. If you weren't feeling the contraction, you can think light foot on the floor, and that might help you feel the contraction. So it works both ways, okay? Hannah's indicating the rotational direction we're going for with this rails contraction. And just like before, I want you to start ramping up the intensity here. Let's ramp it up a little bit faster so that your whole body gets involved, up at 50% effort, 75% effort, and then your greatest safe effort. So this should feel very similar to what we were doing before of lifting your foot off the ground, but nothing is moving. Really trying to make your foot light on the ground. Trying to spin that thigh bone a little bit more. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold that contraction and slowly let go of that intensity. That slow fade can really help your brain understand what muscles we were just training. Very, very useful. Okay, take a breath to just let your nervous system calm down, and then when you're ready, walk that foot in and let's set up on the other side for your PAILs RAILs hip sleeper setup. Little woodgy.
It feels so weird.
So weird. Yeah.
And range hip IR. Always.
Yeah. It's actually a great topic. Why do your joints feel so weird after PAILs RAILs at end range? A great topic, but a topic for another day. Come visit us at office hours and we'll fill you in. Okay, so find your hip sleeper setup on this side. Again, invite you to use a prop or a block under your knee if that knee joint is talking to you a little bit. Also that side lying option where you start facing away, I'll just indicate here. You start facing away, you hook your top thigh, and then you turn into it. This can be a nice way to find that rotation as well. So whatever setup you have found, start breathing with the goal of relaxing any tissues that might be feeling tight. Nice. And just taking a few more relaxing breaths. Great. Okay, and this side might feel different from the other side. So let that awareness reach into the joint, feel what's going on. Now with your next inhale, go ahead and pack that air into your midsection, kind of pressurize that midsection so you feel nice and braced. Commit to keeping your pelvis and your lower back flat on the floor, glued to the floor, and then start turning on that rotational effort that makes your foot heavier into the ground. As you get a feel for that, start easy so that you're sure your thigh bone isn't moving away from the floor. You're just creating that rotational effort, trying to rotate your leg. The floor is in the way. Ramp that effort up to 30%, 40%. Thinking about using your heel, but also your big toe joint to pull the floor towards your midline as you get up to 50%. As we go over that 50% mark, you should feel that tension spreading over to your midsection and even into your upper body as we build to 70%, layering on more and more tissue involved with this effort. 80% effort. This should feel pretty significant, like you couldn't last forever here. Bring it up to 90%, and then keep growing that intensity to the greatest safe effort for your hip. Really find it and hold it. 10 seconds, team. Good. Breathing. 3, 2, 1, and fade that contraction. All right. And that contraction might have the effect of letting your tissue open up a little more, which might let you walk that foot out a little bit further, might let you drop your knee a little bit further to the ground. Take up that slack so you're still working at end range. Okay, and then brace your abs before we start, and start thinking of rotating your thigh the opposite direction. That is the rotation that would make your foot light on the ground. Make sure you don't lift it off the ground here so that we don't move anything, but really make it light feeling. Start keying into the contractions you feel. You might, again, use a hand on the hip just to notice those contractions. The goal is contraction of tissue, not movement. Ramp that up to 50% effort. Get your whole body to help you as you ramp it up to 75% effort. And then continue ramping up intensity to 100% effort, or as close as feels doable for you. Hold on to that intensity. Good. Flirting with any cramp sensations you might find there. 5, 4, 3, 2, keep working. Don't let it go yet. Now very slowly let that tissue relax. Yeah, and that can be a great way to just key in on, oh, that part of my hip was working. I didn't quite realize that. Okay, good awareness building exercise. Okay, so then from here, I'm going to have Hannah sweep around the other side again, just so you can keep seeing her working hip. We're going to revisit those capsule rotations like we were doing at the beginning of class, and just notice any difference. So lift your working leg, make sure that non-working leg is out of the way, and then fingertip on kneecap or hands on thigh to feel that the thigh bone is not going to do anything except rotate as we begin here. So brace your abs, back is flat, and start rotating your thigh bone. Especially as you move into internal rotation, it might feel more familiar at the very least. It might feel like you are able to go much further too. Maybe. Yeah, nice. Good.
I feel real tired.
Yeah, exactly. It might feel like those tissues are very fatigued, but that is how we drive adaptation to those tissues, so that's a good thing. Good. Keep working 30 more seconds. Knocking on that door at the end range rotation. Try to actively rotate a little bit more. Good. Very nice. Give it 12 more seconds. Trying to turn your hamstring further one way and further the other way. 3, 2, and 1. Set it down. Great stuff. Good. Okay. Then we'll do the other side. Make sure that lower back is flat and braced. The thigh bone is straight up to the ceiling. You'd be surprised. Really check in on that. Sometimes people think their thigh bone is straight up and it's actually way out to the side or maybe way down towards the floor. Yep. So just take a gander and look at it and then hand on to make sure that it's not going to move as we start to rotate that hip joint. Go for it. 1 minute here. Good. If there's any seams on your leggings, if you're using that, or there's any marks on your leg or kind of landmarks you can use to really conceptualize that turn, that might really help you. I'm just seeing the seam on the side of Hannah's leggings here, that she's trying to turn that seam up towards her face as she internally rotates. Then she's trying to turn that seam away from her as she externally rotates. That can really help your body know where it is in space. 20 seconds to go. Good. Very nice. And 3, 2, 1, and relax. Okay, so for this next drill, we're going to now work both legs at the same time, but in a pretty similar position that we were working before in terms of that internal rotation. Again, I'm going to have Hannah show you the basic setup so you can see, and then we'll get you keyed up and ready to go. So you're going to use that block now between your thighs. Again, make sure it is inside of your knee joints, and then zoom in on your lower back and make sure it's completely flat on the ground once you get set up here. And then very often the knees are going to try to sneak over your belly, and we want to keep the knees right over the hip joints. It will make it harder, and that's the point. Okay, so squeezing that block. In just a second you'll join us here, but the rotational effort is going to be heels working apart from each other. One might go further than the other, and then driving in and actually trying to squeeze your heels together if possible. The key, yes, the key throughout is to keep that block squeezed, and you might actually notice that the block kind of gets rolled one way and then gets rolled the other way, and that's a really good indicator that you are doing it right, okay? So one quick note as you're doing your setup, it's very common that getting both feet off the ground is almost too much for the abs, in which case you might want to set your feet on a couch or on a chair, so you just have a little starting place where you can really lock your abs in, okay? Otherwise, block between the thighs, back is flat, and go ahead and lift both feet off the ground. And then from here, let's start by bringing the heels in towards each other. Try to bend your knees just a little more. There we go, good. So they're parallel with the floor. Really squeezing those heels, squeezing the block, and then keep the block squeezed as you reach your heels apart. Find that complete stop on both sides, and then back together. We're just working 30 seconds here, so really spend a maximum amount of effort. Good. And even if your motion is very small, if your heels are moving, just 6 or 7 inches apart, that's totally fine. I still want that high intensity effort. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Try to build intensity. 4, a little more. 3, a little more block squeeze. 2, 1, and melt it down. Good. Okay. Take a moment to breathe. Do the motion that feels good through your hips and your back. Sometimes I feel like it feels good to arch my back, little rotation, because we're coming back for a second round.
No.
So you have to know,
yay!
You have to know that the only reason we're asking for this high intensity is because we care about you and we want your hips to be happy. We just got to include that little caveat. We don't get pleasure out of the pain that's happening. Okay, here we go. Back goes flat again.
You do, great.
That was your rest. Place that block between your thighs. And then navigate your knees right over your hip sockets and your shins parallel with the floor. And then bend those, or rather bring those heels in towards each other. Squeeze the block, squeeze the heels, and 30 seconds all out effort trying to rotate both hip joints. Very nice. Good. And take that time to find a complete stop so that if one leg can move further than the other, you're actually able to clock that. Nice. Good. 15 seconds. Keep working. Make sure that lower back is not sneaking away from the floor. That block isn't getting light between the thighs, but you're squeezing it tightly. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Relax. Very nice. Okay, so now you're really done with that one. We're going to finish from standing though. So go ahead, Make your way back up to standing one more time. And the only switch this time is that we're going to set up like we were before, hands on thighs, but we're going to work the full spinal car here just to finish things up nicely. So make those feet feel heavy. Make sure you feel real connected through your thighs. Feel some active effort through your armpits because we don't want the scapula to move around as we move through those upper spinal segments. So arms should stay active, and then start curling your tailbone under. You're just going to get 1 minute of active spinal work in. Feeling that tailbone curl turn into a lumbar stretch in your lower back, and then send that into your mid back, your ribs starting to stretch. Start to stretch the segments in your upper back, and then send that even into the base of your neck and the top of your neck. And then once you're maxed out there, make sure your hands are still heavy and start at your tailbone again. Tailbone reaching away, reaching your belt buckle towards your knees or even towards the floor, spilling that pelvis forward. And then try to reach your stomach towards your forearms to get a little bit more extension out. Try to reach your shirt logo forward and up to someone standing in front of you. And then open up the front of your neck, find that stretch. Keep that stretch going as you start again at your tailbone, curling under. Very nice. So this one goes out to all of you who have mentioned that cat-cow feels great but can't be done all the time because you can't go into quadruped. Here you go. Here's an alternative. Good. Very nice. Last 15 seconds. Keep it active. Keep those arms working. Can you make your feet any heavier into the floor as you finish up? Can you find any more tissue to contract along your spinal column? Nice. 3, 2, 1, and relax.
Woo.
Hey, great work. And great work to you. Thanks for joining us, and let us know any questions. This one has a few weird variables to play with, so I'd love to hear your comments as always, and we will see you soon.